Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Zarah Babalola had always known she was different. At just 27 years old, she had already carved out her place as one of the most prominent tech entrepreneurs in all of West Africa. Originally from Lagos, Nigeria, Zarah's upbringing had shaped her into the bold, relentless woman she was. She came from a comfortable middle-class home, but even from a young age she refused to follow the well-trodden path expected of her, get a safe corporate job, marry someone from a respectable family, and focus on raising children. Zarah had bigger ambitions. Her agile mind and knack for problem-solving drew her toward technology, and she poured her energies into building software solutions that tackled the distinct infrastructural and economic challenges faced by her fellow Africans. By the age of 25, she had created Hstorytine, a microfinance and mobile payment platform that allowed ordinary people across Africa's rural and urban divides to securely access small loans and transfer funds. It was a game changer. Investors had flocked to Zarah's venture, and with every additional contract, her influence grew. She had quickly amassed not just fame but also a staggering fortune. She was recognized in continental magazines and heralded as a symbol of a new generation, young, forward-thinking Africans poised to reshape the global tech scene. Yet, despite her glamorous image in glossy magazines and her unstoppable business momentum, her personal life bore the brunt of her dedication. She was always busy with meetings, pitches, traveling to conferences, and expanding Hstorytine across borders. Leisurely dinners, friendships, romance, these all fell to the wayside. In her culture, however, family was paramount. Zarah's parents deeply loved her and supported her success, but they worried about her punishing schedule. She never slowed down, and at 27, they were concerned that she might lose the chance to settle down and start a family. Sitting in their well-appointed living room in Lekki, her mother would lament to guests, "All this success is fantastic, but who will carry on our family name? Zarah simply doesn't have time." Her father, once proud that his daughter had charted her own path, now joined his wife in subtle suggestions. "We know you're busy, Zarah, but we want to see you happy. Life isn't just about success in business. One day, all these deals might fade, and you'll wish you had a companion by your side." Zarah responded the way she always did, with a polite nod and a promise that she would one day find love on her own terms. The problem was, if it wasn't money, it was time. She never seemed to have enough of both. Her father, in his desperation, began speaking to old family friends, searching through distant branches of their extended family tree, trying to see if there was a suitable young man who could understand and complement Zarah's lifestyle. One such family friend was Chief Alawukara from Ibadan, an influential figure who had some vested interest in bridging alliances with the Babalola family. The Alawukara lineage was well known for its old money wealth, which came from real estate, oil, and extensive farmland in southwestern Nigeria. Unbeknownst to Zarah, her father had quietly opened the door for a potential arranged marriage, a tradition not entirely extinct in certain parts of the modern African setting, especially among wealthy families who believed in forging strong alliances. When the conversation first arose, Zarah's mother felt uncertain. She was, after all, aware of Zarah's fierce independence, but she, too, worried about her daughter's unrelenting solitude. The mother consoled herself that maybe, if they found a young man who was also forward-thinking, kind, and ambitious, he could be the anchor in Zarah's life. Meanwhile, Zarah remained blissfully unaware of the undercurrents. She was too busy to notice the furtive phone calls or the arrival of visitors who wanted to discuss family lineage. Her routine involved waking at dawn, jogging around the plush estate for 30 minutes, before diving straight into her makeshift home office to handle cross-continental video calls with prospective investors in the United States and Europe. Mid-afternoons were spent in Hstorytine's central headquarters on Victoria Island. And in the evenings, if she wasn't attending a tech event or networking gala, she was traveling to neighboring countries, meeting heads of state, or showcasing her technology in conventions aimed at bridging Africa's digital divide. All that changed one fateful Friday evening. Zarah had been summoned by her father to come to the family house after work. She rarely dismissed her father's invitations, because he usually only asked her to stop by when it was a matter of importance. When she arrived, the living room was quietly arranged for guests. Fresh flowers stood on the side tables, soft music played from the overhead speakers, and her mother was dressed in an elegant but formal gown. Beside her mother was a woman Zarah vaguely recognized. She recalled meeting the lady at a Yoruba cultural festival several years back. The woman was all smiles, gently placing her hand on her mother's in a sign of warmth and familiarity. Zarah greeted them and sat down, feeling oddly self-conscious amid the sudden hush that enveloped the room. Just then, her father emerged from another room, and with him was a stranger. A tall man, likely in his early 30s, with an athletic build. Dressed in a sharply tailored navy blue suit that hinted at wealth or good taste, he carried himself with a certain self-assuredness that was neither arrogant nor timid. His eyes took in Zarah with a mixture of curiosity and a quiet calm. Zarah felt a tingle of unease, though she wasn't exactly certain why. Perhaps it was the charged atmosphere that the entire family had created. Once they were all seated, her father cleared his throat. The fatherly smile he gave her seemed to harbor a hidden plea for understanding. In that moment, Zarah braced herself. She felt something big was about to be announced. She couldn't have been more right. Her father introduced the stranger as Adeyemi Alawukara, or Yemi as the family lovingly called him. He was the eldest son of the Alawukara clan from Ibadan. A proud graduate of one of the country's elite universities, with an MBA from a top international school, he managed parts of the family empire, specifically their agricultural tech interests. He had spent some years abroad but had recently returned to Nigeria to continue expanding the family business. Zarah politely nodded, responding with mechanical courtesies. In reality, she was dying to know why this was important to her. Then came the blow. The families had discussed a unification. There was talk of bridging old relationships, merging influences, and working toward the progressive growth of both lineages. In short, her father announced that she was to consider marrying Adeyemi. The word "considered" was used, but everything about her parents' hopeful gazes and the presence of the other family signaled that this wasn't an option. This was a sealed agreement, one that would likely be sealed in a matter of days or weeks if Zarah's father and Chief Alawukara had their way. Zarah's face turned pale. Her heart pounded so loudly that she was certain everyone in the room could hear it. She prided herself on being a modern African woman, forging her path through technology, rejecting archaic norms. Yet now she was being forced into an arranged marriage that resembled something from a century-old tradition. Her mother tried to reassure her with warm words about how Adeyemi was no stranger to modern values, but Zarah felt cornered. How could her parents, who had always championed her independence, arrange this behind her back? Glancing over at Adeyemi, she noticed he, too, appeared uncomfortable, though he wore an expression that suggested acceptance or at least resignation. Perhaps he was also bound by a sense of familial duty. African traditions of respect and collective decision-making, especially among the elite, could be incredibly powerful. Zarah was torn. On one hand, she wanted to rebel, to storm out of the room. On the other hand, her deep love for her parents and sense of filial piety waged war within her. She also recognized that Adeyemi was possibly as much a pawn in this arrangement as she was. Still, she could feel the cords of her freedom fraying with every second she remained silent. She had built a life on her own terms. How could she give up that autonomy now? Yet, the immediate demands of her father's health, her mother's emotional pleas, and the impressive profile of Adeyemi caused her to waver. Like a wave crashing against her carefully constructed fortress of independence, the notion of an arranged marriage threatened to sweep everything away. What neither she nor Adeyemi could have anticipated, however, was that this forced union would eventually lead to unexpected blessings, forging not only a business synergy but a bond that might be built upon mutual respect, companionship, and even love. Little did Zarah know that she stood at the precipice of a life-altering journey, one that would test her resilience, broaden her understanding of what partnership could mean, and ultimately reshuffle her priorities in ways she never imagined. In the weeks to come, the question wasn't merely whether she could accept this arrangement, but how the unstoppable force that was Zarah Babalola would adapt to what felt like an archaic tradition. She would soon discover that sometimes, the greatest gifts in life come in the most unexpected forms, even if that gift happened to be a stranger thrust into her life with barely a warning. The weeks that followed the awkward introduction to Adeyemi were a blur of traditional engagement processes, tense family dinners, and endless phone calls. Nigerian culture, particularly among the Yoruba, placed great emphasis on formalities before a wedding. Zarah found herself marooned in a whirlwind of introduction ceremonies, a family gathering known as the Emomi Enemo E, Know Me and Let Me Know You, and intense planning sessions for the traditional engagement party. What grated on her nerves was how quickly things escalated. One moment she was running Tegarich from her plush office on Victoria Island, shutting down sexism in boardrooms and forging new partnerships across the continent. The next, she was juggling color palettes for her asoebi, the coordinated family attire, and meticulously choosing the engagement venue to satisfy both families' desire for grandeur. The Babalolas had never been ostentatious, but the Alawukra family, being old money, cherished an element of spectacle in their social gatherings. Zarah's father insisted that everything be done to reflect both family status, yet also incorporate touches of modern elegance that Zarah herself preferred. Initially, Zarah had resisted the entire affair. She tried everything short of open rebellion, ignoring her mother's repeated calls, accidentally missing the event planning meeting, and shutting down family members who tried to offer unsolicited advice on how to be a good wife. But her father's stern warning and her mother's tearful pleas brought her back to the table. She recalled those nights when her father had personally driven her home from coding boot camp, encouraging her to chase her dreams. Now, the same man implored her to trust that the family would never make a decision to harm her. As for Adeyemi, whenever they had to be physically present at a function together, Zarah found him well-mannered and quietly competent, but distant. The two rarely spoke outside of mandated events. It was during one such event, a family lunch at the Alawukra country estate in Ibadan, that Zarah realized she and Adeyemi needed to talk. She was still reluctant about the forced nature of the engagement but decided a frank conversation was a necessary step. The estate grounds were expansive, with manicured lawns, a small lake, and peacocks that roamed freely, a testament to the old money that had shaped the Alawukra heritage. After greeting the extended family members, Zarah pulled Adeyemi aside, gesturing for him to walk with her around the neatly trimmed hedges. They strolled in silence for a minute, the warmth of the afternoon sun pouring over them, bringing beads of sweat to the backs of their necks. Finally, Zarah broke the tension. "Look, I don't want to play coy. This is strange for me, for both of us, I'm sure." She inhaled deeply, organizing her thoughts. "I built my entire identity around independence. Having my parents arrange a marriage behind my back feels like a betrayal." Adeyemi nodded, his eyes studying the gravel path. "I understand. Believe me, I never thought I'd be in this position either. I've lived abroad for years, worked with people from different cultures, even had serious relationships, none of which my family approved because they didn't fit certain expectations. In the end, I just want peace in my family, but that desire now ropes me into this arrangement." Zarah stared at him. She realized that while he carried himself with composure, he was also under a great deal of pressure. They were, in a sense, two ambitious individuals who had been molded by strong familial and cultural forces. For a moment, empathy rose within her. "I see. So, what do we do now? I can't pretend I'm happy about any of this, but I also can't fully blame you. We're both victims of the same archaic script." Adeyemi paused before responding. "We could call it off, but that would break our parents' hearts and cause a huge strain between our families. Or we try to make the best of it. I'm not saying we have to pretend to be soulmates overnight, but maybe we can find a middle ground, learn about each other without all these external pressures, see if we can build something, either friendship or more." As they continued their walk, the sun dipping behind thick cumulus clouds, Zarah felt the subtle stirrings of relief. At least he wasn't demanding complete submission or playing the role of a domineering fiancé. There might be room for a civilized approach. All right, she said quietly, I'm willing to try. But on my own terms too. I want us to keep working, keep living our own lives. If we find synergy, good. If not, we'll have to figure out how to navigate that when the time comes. They shook hands, an oddly formal gesture for an engagement, but it was a pact. The days that followed were marginally easier. Zarah and Adeyemi exchanged phone numbers, texted occasionally about practical matters like schedules for the engagement and wedding. They discovered small things about each other. Adeyemi had a passion for precision agriculture technologies, believing that improved food production was one path to African self-reliance. Zarah's tech solutions were more financial and logistical, but they both recognized a shared passion for finding African-led solutions to African problems. Yet, one recurring tension threatened their fragile détente. The wedding date loomed too soon for comfort. According to family tradition and the combined pronouncements of the Babalolas and Alawukers, a formal engagement ceremony would be followed by a registry marriage and then a church wedding. Each step demanded meticulous planning, from the flamboyant display of gifts to the special Yoruba Alaga, the engagement moderator who orchestrates the ceremony. Zarah spent more nights than she cared to admit locked in arguments with her mother over color schemes, venue choices, and the type of music to be played, modern Afropop or traditional highlife. She bemoaned the superficialities of wedding planning, missing the sharper challenges of coding and business negotiations. During one particular phone call, her mother's excitement over the final list of family members who would attend from abroad was palpable. Your Aunt Bisola is flying in from London, and your father's cousin from Atlanta is coming too. Zarah, this wedding will be the talk of the year. Zarah's eyes rolled. All she wanted was a private, minimal fuss ceremony, if she had to go through it at all. Still, she kept her composure. Yes, Mom, I understand. I'll be there, I promise. Just keep it within reason, please. Between the family demands, the looming wedding, and her workload at Tegarich, Zarah felt exhausted. Each day blurred into the next. She barely found time to catch her breath, let alone reflect on her conflicted emotions. Whenever she flopped onto her bed at midnight, her mind roiled with questions. Could love possibly thrive in such forced conditions? Would she regret this marriage, or could it actually be a surprising stroke of fate? One day, a small glimmer of hope presented itself in the form of a collaboration. Out of the blue, Adeyemi suggested that they co-author a paper for an upcoming African Tech Summit. It could highlight the importance of cross-sector innovation, agriculture, and finance, and how combined efforts can solve Africa's problem of food insecurity, he proposed. Zarah found herself intrigued. She was already slated to speak about Tegarich's new microcredit expansion. If they combined their knowledge, they might produce a compelling piece that showcased a synergy. Perhaps, ironically, something born of a forced union could yield remarkable results. They started meeting in coffee shops around Lagos, neutral territory away from prying family eyes. At first, their conversations were stiff, focused purely on business metrics and data sets. But gradually, they found themselves branching into more personal discussions. Zarah learned that Adeyemi was not only well-traveled but also a talented photographer who had documented rural communities in Ethiopia, Kenya, and northern Nigeria. He was quietly philanthropic too. He used proceeds from selling his photographs to fund local youth education programs. In turn, Adeyemi learned of Zarah's philanthropic side. Her ambition for Tegarich wasn't just for profit but to break the vicious cycle of poverty by empowering small business owners with accessible capital. With every meeting, the tension between them began to soften. Zarah was forced to confront the fact that Adeyemi was far from the caricature of a spoiled heir looking to marry for convenience. He was thoughtful, well-read, and genuinely concerned about the socio-economic challenges facing Nigeria and the entire continent. Sometimes, when he listened to her speak passionately about bridging digital divides, she noticed a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips, a silent admiration, perhaps? Yet, doubts still assailed Zarah. She feared that she might be rationalizing acceptance of a marriage she never actively chose. If this had been a freely chosen partnership, she would have been ecstatic to date a man with Adeyemi's qualities. But being forced, however gently, by her family felt like a violation of her autonomy. Every time she grew more comfortable around Adeyemi, a part of her brain cautioned. Remember, you didn't choose this from the start. So, the days sped forward, wedding paraphernalia piling up, family members from near and far arriving in Lagos. The hustle and bustle of Yoruba wedding traditions took center stage. Traditional fabrics were chosen for the respective families, and crates of expensive gifts, boxes of clothes, foodstuff, jewelry, and more, were purchased. Plans for the engagement ceremony, set to take place in Ibadan, continued. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Zarah and Adeyemi worked on their paper, forging a dynamic synergy that surprised them both. Neither wanted to admit it outright, but perhaps the forced closeness was creating a foundation that normal courtship might have achieved at a more measured pace. Fate, tradition, or meddling families, whatever the cause, had thrown them together, and life was going to change for both of them. For Zarah, the big question was whether she could keep her identity intact, or whether the weight of tradition would chip away at who she thought she was. For Adeyemi, he wondered if he could prove to Zarah that, despite the archaic circumstances of their betrothal, real partnership, maybe even love, could emerge from the seeds planted by their families. The day of the traditional engagement ceremony dawned bright and hot, as most days in Ibadan do. Zarah woke up at a guest house near Adeyemi's family estate, her nerves alight with a mix of apprehension and resignation. Women from her extended family surrounded her in the parlor, fussing over her makeup and outfit. She wore a stunning iro and buba, a modern take on the traditional Yoruba attire, in a rich shade of turquoise with intricate gold embroidery. Her gele, head tie, soared in a regal style, proclaiming her status as the bride-to-be. Even as stylists and older aunties cooed about how beautiful she looked, her chest felt tight. She remembered being a teenager, sneaking into tech meetups in Yaba, fearlessly coding alongside software developers twice her age. She never thought she would be that bride with thick layers of foundation, flamboyant headgear, and an audience of hundreds, all for a ceremony that symbolized her submersion into tradition. Yet here she was. Part of her wanted to bolt, but the glint of tears she had seen in her mother's eyes earlier that morning reminded her that this was a family affair. It went beyond her alone. The Alaga Iduro and Alaga Ijoko, two ceremonial spokespersons, waited at the venue to orchestrate the event. The engagement hall brimmed with guests, the lively rhythms of bata drums weaving through the crowd. The sweet aroma of local delicacies, jollof rice, asin, spicy goat meat, and moin moin, mixed with the scent of fresh flowers. The stage was decorated with elaborate backdrops sporting both families' initials, and long rows of tables groaned under the weight of traditional engagement gifts, fruits, yam tubers, a huge calabash of kola nuts, and other symbolic offerings. When it was time for the ceremony to begin, Zarah's aunt gently led her to a curtained area where she would wait for her formal introduction. Meanwhile, Adeyemi and his family entered in a joyful procession of drummers, friends, and relatives singing oriki, praise poetry that extolled the virtues of the groom's lineage. Adeyemi himself looked dashingly handsome in a matching turquoise agbada, embroidered with gold. As he stepped onto the stage, the Alaga commanded him to prostrate himself, in the traditional Yoruba manner, to pay respects to Zarah's family. Adeyemi did so with grace, albeit with a quiet grin, for while these customs were second nature to the older generation, they felt somewhat performative to the modern man. Zarah's turn came soon after. The Alaga's voice bellowed over the microphone, calling the bride out. Heart-pounding, Zarah stepped forward with measured steps. She, too, had to kneel before Adeyemi's parents, a sign of respect in Yoruba culture. Cameras clicked frenetically, and the crowd erupted in cheers. She felt her cheeks burn, not entirely with embarrassment but with overwhelming emotion. Amid it all, she glanced up to see Adeyemi's gentle smile, as if reassuring her that she wasn't alone in navigating these traditional waters. The ceremony continued with prayers, jokes, comedic banter from the Alaga, and a reading of the letter from Adeyemi's family requesting Zarah's hand in marriage. Zarah's family responded with a letter of acceptance, symbolizing that both families had entered into this union willingly. The guests clapped, the drummers resumed their vibrant beating, and dancers swayed to the rhythms of Afrobeat. Gifts were exchanged, sealed by the cutting of a small cake. By the end of the ceremony, Zarah was exhausted yet emotionally charged. She caught Adeyemi's eyes across the hall. He gave her a small nod that said, "We made it." In the following days, the newly engaged couple had barely a moment to rest. The engagement was only the first hurdle. Next came the civil marriage at a registry in Lagos. This time, the affair was smaller, only immediate family and close friends. Standing in a plain municipal office, with a simple white dress and Adeyemi in a sharp suit, Zarah felt a sense of surreal calm. The officiant read the legal statements. Their parents stood behind them. Zarah signed her name on the dotted line, her hand trembling slightly. Within minutes, she was legally Mrs. Zarah Babalola Alawukra. She stared at the certificate, heart pounding like a distant drum. It was done. She was married. But the families, wanting a full celebration, insisted on a church wedding in Lagos a week later, a large, glamorous event in an upscale parish. The notion of a white wedding had become part and parcel of modern Nigerian wedding culture. By now, Zarah moved through each ceremony with a practiced smile, as though it were a series of carefully orchestrated business transactions. On the day of the church wedding, a regal hush fell over the congregation as she walked down the aisle in a modest yet elegant white gown, her father by her side. Adeyemi waited by the altar, decked out in a finely tailored tuxedo. The priest welcomed them, sermonized on the sanctity of marriage, and led them through their vows. Zarah found herself momentarily choked up, reciting words about devotion and partnership. A fleeting wave of panic shot through her. Were these words truly from her heart? Or was she simply following script for the sake of tradition? She dared a glance at Adeyemi's face. He was watching her intently, his eyes filled with something akin to hope, or was it confusion? Maybe he, too, was grappling with the enormity of this step. After the formalities ended, the recessional hymn echoed through the church. The newlyweds marched out, greeted by a flurry of confetti thrown by friends and family. Cameras flashed, capturing moments that would live in frames on living room walls for decades. For the sake of show, Zarah and Adeyemi smiled and waved. While part of her still felt uneasy, she also noted a distinct sense of relief. At least the ceremonies were done. The stressful whirlwind of 3 different wedding rites was over. What followed was a lavish reception at a luxury hotel. Politicians, business moguls, celebrities, and the who's who of Lagos society thronged the grand ballroom. The bride and groom were heralded in by live band music and dancing. Guests feasted on a buffet of West African and continental dishes. The highlight of the evening was a brief speech made by Zarah's father, praising his daughter's accomplishments and blessing the union. Adeyemi's father, the venerable Chief Alawukra, also gave a speech, lauding Zarah as a modern-day queen who would bring innovation and pride to their lineage. To Zarah's surprise, he also revealed publicly that she and Adeyemi planned to work on a joint philanthropic project to benefit rural farmers. Zarah's eyes flicked to Adeyemi. He simply nodded and gave a small smile, confirming that the speech had been planned with his knowledge. She silently appreciated that at least Adeyemi was bringing her into the family's philanthropic pursuits as an equal contributor. Then came the first dance. The lights dimmed, and a soft Afro-soul track drifted through the speakers. Adeyemi offered his hand, Zarah accepted. They moved slowly around the dance floor, cameras and phones capturing their every step. Up close, Zarah noticed Adeyemi's subtle cologne, the faint perspiration at his temples, and the tension in his shoulders that matched her own. He leaned in slightly. "We made it," he whispered. She gave a small laugh, the kind that vibrated with tentative relief. "Yes, we did." To any observer, they looked like a love-struck couple, the embodiment of blissful matrimony. But behind the public facade, Zarah and Adeyemi knew the real work was only beginning. How would they navigate shared living arrangements, daily routines, or personal aspirations? Zarah's father had gently suggested they move into the Alawukra estate in Ibadan for a while, out of respect for Adeyemi's parents. But that notion set off alarm bells in Zarah's mind. She had her business headquarters in Lagos, her entire life in the city's hustle, and a desire to remain independent. Adeyemi, on the other hand, had responsibilities that frequently took him to Ibadan, but he also traveled widely. The question of where to live was just one among many that hung in the air, unspoken. When the festivities ended well past midnight, Zarah found herself alone with Adeyemi in the sumptuous suite reserved for them. She gazed around at the rose petals scattered on the bed, the chilled champagne on a side table, trappings of a romantic honeymoon night. But she felt more like a guest in someone else's fairy tale. Adeyemi cleared his throat. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Zarah nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yes, just a bit overwhelmed." Truth be told, she was physically and mentally drained. Adeyemi, sensing her mood, offered a respectful out. "It's late. Let's not force anything. We can take our time," he said gently, referencing the unspoken expectation of consummation. Zarah let out a relieved breath. "Thank you," she whispered. They ended up having a cup of tea in the lounge area, still dressed in the trappings of their wedding attire. They spoke in low tones about how surreal the day felt, how they both appreciated each other's willingness to see it through. And so ended the day that would be etched forever in their personal histories. The day two near strangers tied their lives together in a triple-faceted wedding extravaganza. Despite the forced nature of it all, Zarah felt a quiet gratitude that at least Adeyemi wasn't the cold, domineering husband she had feared. The question that still loomed was whether they could build a real marriage from this orchestrated beginning, or if the union would remain a facade. One thing was certain: tomorrow would usher in a new phase of life, one she never envisioned yet was now bound to navigate. 3 weeks after the ceremonies, Zarah found herself back in her spacious Lagos penthouse, though now she shared it with Adeyemi. After some delicate negotiations between their parents, where Zarah insisted that her life and business were based in Lagos, and she couldn't uproot herself to Ibadan, Adeyemi agreed to move in with her. He argued to his parents that the best strategy was to maintain a presence in Lagos for the expansions they planned with their agritech wing. Chief Alawukra relented, but not without expressing his desire that they occasionally spend weekends in Ibadan to stay connected to the family estate. For Zarah, the domestic arrangement was jarring at first. She had lived alone since she was 23, cherishing her independence. Now, as she opened her eyes each morning, she was aware of the gentle breathing of another person in her space. Adeyemi was surprisingly tidy, which she appreciated. He cooked breakfast sometimes, omelette spiced with suya pepper or a quick egg stew with yams, a small gesture that caught Zarah off guard. She had expected minimal involvement from him, but in small ways he was proving to be considerate. Still, everyday life did not magically transform into marital bliss. The biggest challenge was the shifting dynamic of their individual schedules. Zarah's life revolved around Tegarich. She was a demanding boss, used to working late, answering calls from international investors at odd hours, and scheduling her day with ruthless efficiency. Adeyemi's routine involved traveling to farmland sites, meeting local government officials, and engaging with his extensive family business. Their times at home sometimes overlapped in the late evening, where they'd share a quick dinner or watch a Nollywood movie to unwind. Some nights, Adeyemi was absent altogether, staying overnight in Ibadan for an early morning site visit. Other times, Zarah was away on business trips to Ghana or Rwanda, pushing Tegarich's cross-border expansions. Initially, they tried their best to communicate, leaving notes on the fridge or texting updates. But as the novelty of the wedding wore off, the cracks in their forcibly aligned lives became more evident. They argued about small things, like Adeyemi's assumption that Zarah would want him to drive her to the office. She valued her solitude during the commute, or the fact that Zarah would bring home colleagues for late-night brainstorming sessions without warning him first. On one occasion, a heated argument erupted when Adeyemi discovered that Zarah had turned down an invitation to a weekend family gathering in Ibadan without informing him. "They are my parents too now," he said, exasperated, "and they expect to see you. At least let me know before you make such decisions." Zarah flared up in response. "I don't have to seek anyone's permission to manage my schedule. I have a major pitch in Nairobi next Monday, and my entire weekend is booked. I'm sorry if that inconveniences your family's expectations." The tension in the air was thick. Adeyemi swallowed his frustration, trying to keep his voice level. "I'm not saying you need permission, but marriage is about partnership, communication. I don't want to be in the dark when it comes to family matters, especially when they involve you. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the bed, each wrapped in their own swirling thoughts. Zarah tossed and turned, confronted by an unsettling realization. Maybe her parents were right about her being too independent for traditional marriage. She had cultivated a life where she was the sole decision-maker. Could she learn to incorporate someone else's feelings and schedule without it feeling like an intrusion on her personal freedom? For Adeyemi, he grappled with a similar conundrum. He was raised to believe that marriage meant unity and collaborative decisions. Yet he recognized that Zarah's success was built on her autonomy. They were both strong-willed individuals, trying to adapt under the constraints of an arranged marriage. Amid these domestic strains, a business crisis erupted at Tegariche. A major partnership deal with a Kenyan microlender fell through unexpectedly, citing regulatory complications. Worse, a rumor circulated in the local tech ecosystem that Tegariche's security protocols were being questioned by certain financial regulators, threatening to erode investor confidence. Zarah was livid, suspecting that some competitor might be fueling these rumors to undermine her rapidly growing empire. She spent days locked in emergency meetings with her legal team and cybersecurity experts, trying to plug any holes and reassure partners. Stress gnawed at her. One afternoon, she dragged herself home, feeling entirely depleted. Adeyemi was there, surprisingly so, in the kitchen stirring a pot of spicy jollof rice. She muttered a hoarse greeting, too drained to muster her usual composure. He eyed her with concern. "You look exhausted, Zarah. Are you all right?" She sank onto a stool by the kitchen counter, burying her head in her hands. For a moment, she stayed silent, letting the tension wash over her. Adeyemi placed a glass of cold water in front of her, a small gesture of care that she found oddly comforting. Finally, she exhaled. "There's a problem at Tegariche. We might lose an important partnership in Kenya, and I'm not sure how deep this security rumor runs. If I can't contain it quickly, it could unravel a lot of our progress." Adeyemi turned off the stove and joined her at the counter. "I know we haven't exactly had the smoothest start, but if there's any way I can help, let me know." She gave him a skeptical glance. He continued, "I have a background in negotiating with regulatory bodies for our agritech expansions. While it's not the same sector, I do have contacts in the East African market, people who might be able to give you insight into their local policies." Zarah paused, absorbing his words. In a crisis, her instincts were to handle everything herself. Yet here was Adeyemi offering a line of assistance. After a moment's hesitation, she decided to trust him. "Any leads would be appreciated," she finally said. "This can't become a bigger scandal." That evening, instead of retreating to separate corners of the penthouse, they worked side by side. Zarah opened her laptop to scan through the legal documents and investor letters. Adeyemi rummaged through his contact list, placing calls and sending messages to colleagues in East Africa. He was methodical, calm, his voice assured. Zarah found herself strangely impressed by the depth of his network. Hours ticked by, the jollof rice growing cold on the stove, but they barely noticed. Around midnight, Adeyemi managed to set up a crucial conference call for the following morning with one of his old classmates, a Kenyan banking official who now worked in a regulatory capacity. Zarah breathed a sigh of relief, feeling a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could quell the crisis. Later, as they finally turned to eat the now lukewarm dinner, a quiet sense of camaraderie pulsed between them. The earlier disputes about family obligations and personal schedules temporarily faded in the face of a real, external challenge. Zarah was grateful that Adeyemi had stepped up without question or judgment, offering his skills when she needed them most. Perhaps this was one silver lining in their forced union, having a dependable partner in the trenches when life threw curveballs. The following week was a blur of conference calls, stakeholder meetings, and crisis management sessions. With Adeyemi's facilitation, Zarah was able to speak directly with influential contacts in Kenya, clarifying Tegariche's security protocols and laying out a plan to strengthen any perceived vulnerabilities. Although it wasn't a quick fix, the rumor lost traction, and Tegariche's Kenyan partner softened its stance, allowing negotiations to reopen. By week's end, Zarah had contained the crisis enough to ensure that her company's reputation remained intact. When her legal counsel declared that it could have been worse, she silently thanked Adeyemi. Over a late dinner that Friday, they both collapsed onto the couch in front of the television, flipping through Nollywood channels half-heartedly. Eventually, Adeyemi turned the TV off, looking at Zarah. "I'm glad we got through that," he said softly. She nodded, offering a half-smile. "Me too. Thanks for stepping in." "Anytime," he replied. "That's what partners do, right?" The word partners hung in the air. Zarah felt the weight of that word, so commonly used in business contexts, yet also so significant in marriage. Were they truly partners now, beyond just documents and family obligations? In that moment, Zarah noticed how close they were on the couch, their shoulders almost touching. A flicker of warmth spread across her chest. It wasn't romance in the classic sense, no dramatic confessions of love, but it was comforting companionship, a subtle recognition that they might be forging a relationship on their own terms. Perhaps forced marriages weren't always doomed. Sometimes, adversity drew people together in a way that cautious courtship never could. They continued to talk softly, discussing the next steps for their philanthropic work, the possibility of merging their business interests to create synergy between Tegarich's microfinancing platform and Adeyemi's agritech expansions. Conversation melted into a companionable silence. As they both drifted off in the glow of the city lights shining through the window, a gentle peace filled the room. The forced marriage might still present challenges, but something unspoken had shifted, an acknowledgement that neither of them was alone in the journey anymore. The next few months marked a turning point. Zarah and Adeyemi gradually settled into a rhythm, albeit an unconventional one for a newly married couple. They operated more like business partners, sharing resources, dividing tasks, and meeting each other halfway. Yet something deeper was beginning to form, bridging the gaps in their initially forced union. One pivotal development was their joint philanthropic project, an idea initially floated by Adeyemi's father during the wedding reception. The project aimed to provide microloans for smallholder farmers, many of whom lacked access to traditional bank financing. Tegarich would handle the digital platform and distribution of funds, while the Alawukra Agritech division would oversee training, seed supplies, and best farming practices. The synergy was perfect, a true marriage of technology and agriculture to uplift rural communities. Zarah and Adeyemi spent weeks refining the proposal. They met with government officials, agricultural extension workers, and local chiefs in rural areas to explain how the program would work. On one memorable trip to a farming community near Oyo town, they trudged through muddy fields, meeting a group of cassava farmers who were eager to improve yield but strapped for capital. Zarah carefully explained how Tegarich's mobile platform would give them access to microloans at fair interest rates, delivered right to their phones. Adeyemi added that their agritech solutions would provide real-time data on weather patterns and soil health, helping the farmers optimize their planting cycles. At the end of the day, the grateful farmers presented the couple with tokens of appreciation, baskets of fresh cassava and yams. Zarah laughed at the memory of her grandmother teaching her to pound yam for a traditional soup. As she and Adeyemi drove back to Lagos that evening, the trunk loaded with produce, a sense of pride filled the car. They were actually making a difference, together. Outside of work, they took small steps to connect on a personal level. Adeyemi introduced Zarah to his passion for photography, showcasing a stunning portfolio of images capturing African landscapes and everyday life. One evening, he spread out prints on the living room floor, snapshots of Ethiopia's rock-hewn churches, the bustling markets of Dakar, the luscious green hills of Rwanda. Each photograph told a story of Africa's vibrancy and potential. People often look at Africa through the lens of poverty, Adeyemi said, but there's so much beauty and innovation here. I try to capture that. Zarah was deeply moved, realizing that Adeyemi's vision mirrored her own desire to showcase African excellence through technology. Maybe we can incorporate these photos into a marketing campaign for our philanthropic work, she suggested. He nodded, a spark of excitement in his eyes. Meanwhile, Zarah hesitantly opened up about her childhood memories, how her father had worked multiple jobs to fund her earliest coding boot camps, How her mother's unwavering support had spurred her to keep going even when she felt out of place in male-dominated tech circles. Adeyemi listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions that probed deeper into her motivations. In these quiet moments, they found common ground as two people shaped by familial love and cultural identity, yet determined to push boundaries and challenge outdated norms. Their relationship was not without flaws, of course. Disagreements still arose, especially around the demands of extended family. The Alawukra side continued to push for more frequent visits to Ibadan, more involvement in traditional ceremonies. Zarah felt stifled by some of these expectations, reminding Adeyemi that she was married to him, not to the entire extended clan. Adeyemi tried to mediate, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. The question of children also hovered, a topic that both sets of parents brought up incessantly. At a family gathering in Ibadan, Aunt Majib cornered Zarah in the hallway. "Now that you're fully married, when should we expect our first grandchild?" Zarah forced a polite smile, replying vaguely about focusing on our careers first. Adeyemi overheard the conversation and later apologized to Zarah. "I'm sorry you keep getting bombarded with questions about kids. Our families mean well, but they can be pushy." Zarah's expression softened. "I appreciate the understanding. We barely know each other as husband and wife yet. I'm not ready to add parenthood into the mix." For the most part, though, these challenges no longer felt insurmountable. As the philanthropic project gained traction, the media began to notice. A top Nigerian business magazine featured them on the cover, the tech-agro power couple transforming rural financing. Zarah found herself, for the first time, not minding being labeled a power couple. She realized with some surprise that it felt validating to have Adeyemi by her side in her endeavors. Even if the marriage had started off as a forced alliance, they were building something real and impactful together. One evening, after a successful pitch to a group of foreign donors in Abuja, Zarah and Adeyemi returned to their hotel suite, exhaustion etched in their faces. But a celebratory energy simmered beneath their fatigue. One of the major donors had pledged a significant amount to support the microloan project, enough to expand it into 3 more states. They flopped onto the couch, side by side. Adeyemi turned to her, an amused smile on his lips. "If someone told me 6 months ago that I'd be embarking on a philanthropic crusade with my wife, whom I barely knew, I'd have laughed in their face." Zarah grinned, nodding. "Same here. Life is unpredictable." A hush fell between them. Adeyemi reached out and took her hand, a simple gesture that made Zarah's pulse quicken. They had touched before, hugs for the camera at the wedding, a quick brush of hands in greeting, but this felt intentional, meaningful. He spoke softly, "Zarah, I know this isn't how either of us imagined our lives. I don't want to push you into anything you're not comfortable with. I want you to know I see you. I respect the woman you are. And I'm grateful for this chance to learn from you, and to build something good with you." It was, in essence, a confession of care, if not love outright. Zarah's breath caught in her throat. She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for saying that," she whispered, her voice unsteady. Her mind raced, grappling with her own emotions. Was she ready to admit she was growing fond of him? That she respected him and maybe even cared about him more than a friend? In the quiet glow of the hotel lamps, the tension between them was palpable, an unspoken invitation to push beyond the boundary of a mere partnership. With careful intention, Adeyemi inched closer. Zarah did not resist. Their first genuine kiss was tentative but charged with months of unexpressed feelings. When they parted, her heart felt lighter, her mind swirling. She realized that the lines between business associates, forced spouses, and potential lovers had blurred into something far more profound. The days that followed saw them negotiate this new intimacy with the same practicality they brought to their work. They were slow, cautious, mindful of each other's boundaries. Some nights, they curled up on the couch, talking until dawn about their childhood dreams, their future aspirations, and even the idea of raising a family, someday. Other times, an argument about something trivial reminded them that marriage, whether arranged or chosen, demanded constant communication and compromise. Meanwhile, the philanthropic project launched its pilot phase. Hundreds of rural farmers received their first microloans through Tegarich's platform. Success stories trickled in, farmers paying off loans quickly, investing in modern tools, and increasing their yields. Local newspapers highlighted the project as an example of private sector leadership in addressing food security. Zarah and Adeyemi traveled to various states, meeting beneficiaries, collecting feedback, and refining the model. With every handshake and every testimony of improved livelihoods, they felt a sense of shared purpose, a bond that transcended the typical constraints of an arranged marriage. Finally, after several months of intense work, they hosted a grand unveiling event in Lagos, inviting government officials, business leaders, and the media to showcase the project's achievements. As Zarah took the podium to deliver her speech, Adeyemi stood beside her, beaming. She spoke with passion and clarity about how technology could revolutionize agriculture and transform lives in Africa. She credited her husband's agritech expertise, praising his commitment to ethical business practices. The audience applauded, cameras flashing. In that moment, Zarah felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude, not just for the success of the project, but for the path that led her there. After the event, the two slipped away to the rooftop terrace of the venue, seeking respite from the crowd. The Lagos skyline stretched out before them, a tapestry of lights shimmering against the night sky. "I'm so proud of you," Adeyemi murmured, wrapping an arm around her waist. She leaned her head on his shoulder, contentment flooding her chest. The forced nature of their initial union no longer haunted her the way it once did. She understood now that fate sometimes used the most unconventional methods to shape one's destiny. It was a little past noon when Zarah finished her keynote presentation at a major Pan-African tech conference hosted in Accra. The audience, a mix of bankers, entrepreneurs, and tech enthusiasts, gave a rousing standing ovation. Zarah's talk had spotlighted the success of Tegarich's microloans, the synergy with Adeyemi's agritech initiatives, and the tangible impact on rural livelihoods across West Africa. She stepped off the stage, heart thrumming with pride, only to find Adeyemi waiting with a satisfied grin. He offered her a bottle of chilled water. "You killed it out there," he said. "I'm sure the partnership inquiries are going to flood in." Zarah thanked him, gulping down the water. They were in the final day of a week-long conference that had demanded multiple presentations, panel discussions, and networking sessions. She and Adeyemi had been moving in tandem, each showcasing different facets of their joint venture. The synergy was undeniable, and prospective investors were lining up to collaborate. That evening, as they unwound at a reception party, Adeyemi pulled Zarah aside. "I have a surprise for you," he said, eyes sparkling. She raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" she teased. He just laughed and guided her to a quieter corner. "My father's retiring from several aspects of the family business, and he wants me to fully head up the agritech division. I've decided to accept, but on one condition, that I keep our base in Lagos, and I keep working hand in hand with Tegarich." Zarah felt a surge of excitement. "You mean?" He nodded. "Yes, we'll have more autonomy, no constant pressure to be in Ibadan. The family estate will still be there for us, but my father respects the direction we're taking. He sees the financial gains and the social impact. He's proud of us." Emotion welled up in Zarah's chest. She knew how important paternal approval was in many African families, especially for a son slated to inherit significant responsibilities. Adeyemi's willingness to stand firm for their shared vision proved that he truly saw her as a partner, not just a wife in the traditional sense. She leaned in to kiss his cheek, a public display of affection still somewhat new to them, but it felt right. "That's incredible news. I'm proud of you," she whispered. They flew back to Lagos the next day, brimming with fresh ideas to expand their philanthropic endeavor. But upon returning, a phone call from Zarah's mother brought unexpected news. Her father had fallen ill and was hospitalized. Panicked, Zarah and Adeyemi rushed to the hospital. They found her father weak but stable, suffering from complications related to high blood pressure. The doctors recommended immediate lifestyle changes and strict rest. Seeing her once energetic father looking frail in a hospital bed rattled Zarah to her core. She recalled how he had championed her independence, supported her tech dreams, and ultimately orchestrated her marriage, albeit in a traditional manner. She felt a pang of guilt for the times she had harbored resentment toward him for pushing her into the union. After a few days of hospital visits, her father stabilized. Sitting by his bedside, Zarah held his hand, tears pricking her eyes. "Daddy, you have to get better. We still have so much to do together." He gave her a weak smile. "I'm not going anywhere yet, my dear. But you must promise me you'll take care of yourself too. Stress is no joke." Adeyemi soon joined them, gently placing a hand on Zarah's shoulder. Her father's gaze shifted between them, pride softening his tired features. "Seeing the two of you like this, it warms my heart. I know our methods were old-fashioned, but I only wanted what was best for you." Zarah bit back the tears, nodding. "I understand, Daddy. I'm grateful. Truly." It was the first time she'd admitted it so plainly, the gratitude she felt for a marriage that once felt like a prison sentence but had evolved into something meaningful. Adeyemi squeezed her shoulder in silent support. They left the hospital that day more united than ever. In the following weeks, Zarah took a step back from the day-to-day operations at Tegarich to spend time with her father and help manage his care. Adeyemi picked up the slack, handling investor meetings and forging ahead with the next phase of their philanthropic project. He balanced his new responsibilities at the Alawukra Agritech division with ensuring Tegarich's expansion stayed on track. Despite the increased workload, he never complained, frequently visiting Zarah's father at the hospital and updating him on the progress made. During one particularly difficult night, Zarah woke to find herself consumed with anxiety over her father's prognosis. She couldn't sleep, so she slipped into the living room, pacing back and forth. Moments later, Adeyemi appeared, hair rumpled, eyes full of concern. "Hey," he whispered. "What's wrong?" She let out a shaky breath. "I'm scared. I don't want to lose him. He's always been my pillar." Adeyemi gently guided her to the couch, wrapping her in a comforting embrace. "You're not alone," he said quietly, stroking her hair. "We'll get through this together." In that moment, Zarah realized the profound shift in her life. She was no longer fighting battles alone. She had a husband who stood by her side, willingly sharing her burdens. Her eyes welled with tears, but they were tears of relief and gratitude. About a month later, her father was discharged, significantly improved. The doctors encouraged continued rest and a healthier diet. Family and friends hosted a small Thanksgiving gathering at the Babalola home to celebrate his recovery. Zarah and Adeyemi arrived arm in arm, a united front that didn't go unnoticed. Her mother beamed, greeting them at the door with a warm hug. "You two look wonderful together," she commented. Zarah smiled, feeling genuine happiness. After the gathering, they lingered in the living room with her parents, chatting about future plans. Her father, sipping herbal tea, said with a twinkle in his eye, "So, when will I have little grandchildren running around?" Zarah and Adeyemi exchanged knowing glances. The question no longer felt quite as jarring as before. Zarah kneeled beside her father's chair. "Daddy, we'll take it one step at a time. But we're open to it now." Her father's face lit up with joy, and her mother clapped her hands in excitement. Adeyemi nodded in agreement, his own smile reflecting a new acceptance of the idea. If or when they decided to have children, it would be a choice made together, not a forced dictate. The weeks rolled into months, and their philanthropic project continued to flourish. International grant organizations took notice, praising the initiative as a shining example of homegrown solutions. Zarah and Adeyemi were invited to speak at universities and conferences, inspiring young Africans to dream bigger. Their marriage, once an arrangement they both resented, had blossomed into a genuine partnership built on respect, shared purpose, and slowly growing affection. One afternoon, at a celebratory event for the microloan expansion, Zarah found herself gazing at Adeyemi as he spoke to a group of local farmers. His voice was confident yet empathetic, addressing their concerns and offering solutions. She marveled at how effortlessly he navigated different worlds: the corporate boardrooms, the farmland trenches, and the philanthropic sphere. Later, as they walked to their car, Zarah slid her hand into Adeyemi's. "I need to tell you something," she said, feeling a sudden surge of emotion. He turned, eyebrows raised. "Yes?" Zarah took a deep breath, then looked into his eyes. "I love you," she confessed. She hadn't planned to say it then and there, but the words tumbled out, carrying with them all the gratitude, admiration, and affection she had bottled inside for months. Adeyemi's eyes widened, then softened. He squeezed her hand. "Zarah, I love you too," he whispered. The warmth of that moment enveloped them, two individuals who had been strangers at the altar, now bound by a genuine love that had grown in the most unexpected way. In the days that followed, Zarah found herself reflecting on the journey that brought her here. From a forced betrothal she resented, to a grudging acceptance, to a blossoming respect and partnership, and finally to love. She recalled her initial fury at her parents for orchestrating the match, how she had felt betrayed by the tradition she deemed outdated. Yet, had it not been for their insistence, she might never have opened herself to Adeyemi's kindness, intelligence, and passion. Their shared achievements, both in business and philanthropy, attested to the power of combining strengths, forging alliances, and trusting in a future where each partner genuinely uplifts the other. On a balmy evening in their Lagos penthouse, they cooked dinner together, the aroma of spiced fish stew filling the kitchen. Adeyemi teased her about her heavy-handed use of pepper, and she laughed, claiming it was the secret to staying warm and healthy. The banter felt natural, intimate, a far cry from their early days of awkwardness and tension. As they sat down to eat, Adeyemi raised his glass of palm wine. "To us," he said, voice thick with emotion. Zarah lifted her own glass, eyes shining. "To us." They clinked glasses, savoring the sweet tang of the drink, the comforting hum of the evening. In the background, distant traffic from the streets of Lagos provided a steady rhythm, a reminder of the bustling city that had witnessed their improbable union. Later, they lounged on the balcony, taking in the city lights. Zarah rested her head on Adeyemi's shoulder, contentment flooding her. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful it all happened the way it did," she murmured. Adeyemi turned, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Me too," he replied, voice husky with affection. In that quiet moment under the glittering African sky, Zarah understood with absolute clarity. Sometimes, what begins as an unwanted obligation transforms into life's greatest blessing. Her journey, shaped by family, culture, and an unexpected stranger, had led her to discover not just a prosperous business alliance, but a profound, enduring love. And she knew that if given the chance to go back and change the story, she wouldn't alter a single page. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.